Alrighty, so we are indeed on time. It is 1:40, and I like obedience, and I see that we're all from good homes here. We got seated in 2 minutes, and I love that. I love that. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Sondre Roden, and I'll be moderating today's book launch. Now, this is a momentous occasion, and there are a lot of people here to get recognized. I know everybody is important in their own right. So I won't be able to call everybody's name. I won't be able to say everybody's title. But at the head table here, we have Minister Edmund Bart. Let's give him a round of applause. Yes. And right beside the minister on his left, we have Professor Ian Boxhill, who is the deputy principal of the University of the West Indies Mona campus. Can you give him a round of applause as well? And on the right is a figure. A figure, I might say, a very interesting individual on the right of the minister. Some may know him, but trust me, it's a figure. Professor Lloyd Waller, Executive Director of the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center. Don't worry, I can call him a figure. I work for him. So these Minister, I hope I still have the job after this. But these three are indeed at the head table because this is a momentous occasion looking at the book Tourism Resilience and Recovery for Global Sustainability and Development, Navigating COVID-19 and the Future. Also sitting very closely to the head table, I see the Director of Public Prosecution, Ms. Paul Llewellyn. I ask for a round of applause for her as well. And, there are a lot of contributors to the book, and I want to recognize all of them, Prof, because it's important that everybody recognize who would have contributed. And if you have the book, or when you get the book, you'll see them. I'll just read the names as I have them here. I have Patrick Atty, the Honorable Edmund Bartlett, Ambassador Dr. Richard Bernal. I have Kemoy Burke, Dr. Olivine Burke, Dr. Delroy Chevel, Professor Andrew Spencer, Damian Gordon, Annette Inasanali, Dr. Donovan Johnson, Carol McDonald Riley, Henry Mooney, Dr. Carol Nelson, Howard Reed, Taisha Turner, Dr. Kerry Wallace, and Prof. Lloyd Waller. Give all these people a round of applause for putting this book together, Tourism Resilience and Recovery for Global Sustainability and Development. And we're going to go right into the program. I hope everybody has a program. There's one correction though for Professor Boxhill's name. There is a H making it Hill, but Professor Boxhill, don't be upset about it. They say a city up on a hill cannot be hid. So they made a slight error, but we want you guys to fix that right as we continue. So we're going into the per, and I have Dr. Olivine Burke who will come and give us that per right now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to the head table. My easy task is to say the prayer, so will you just bow your heads, please? Thank you. Heavenly Father, as we're gathered today, this afternoon, dear Lord, to do another of your tasks, which is to launch this very important, relevant, and timely book, Tourism Resilience and Recovery for Global Sustainability and Development, Navigating COVID-19 and the Future. We thank you, Lord, for all the thoughts that were put in the book, and we thank you even more for all the persons who will be inspired, motivated, and directed by all the novel offerings that emanate from this book. And so as we gathered, We just ask for your divine intervention and that this launch will be as successful as the previous two launch held in Dubai and Canada. And or that you just continue to inspire the minister, inspire Professor Waller, and also inspire all the academics and technocrats who work towards the betterment of the tourism sector. These and other mercies I ask. In your name I pray. Amen.
All right, thank you, Dr. Burke. Right now we're going into our remarks as we follow closely, and we'll go right to Professor Boxill, who will give his remarks, and then afterwards we will have remarks from Sir Hilary Beckles, who is the Vice Chancellor of UM. Want to give Professor Beckles a round of applause, please, and Professor Boxill.
Can you hear me? Okay, there you go. Good afternoon. Honorable Minister Edmund Bartlett, Minister of Tourism, our Vice Chancellor, Sir Hilary, I assume that he's online and can hear me. Professor Lloyd Waller, Ambassador Bernal, Miss Paula Llewellyn, and there are many other distinguished guests here this afternoon. I see Godfrey Dyer, who we all know has been with the tourism movement in the country for many, many years. Thank you so much. And all other guests, friends, and especially colleagues from the University of the West Indies. Now, my good friend and colleague, and a while ago, I said to him I was not going to say it, but I'm going to say it because we can all kind of age ourselves. Lloyd Waller. Lloyd Waller was a former student of mine, a good student. I wouldn't say what he was bad at, but he was a good student. Leave it there. But Lloyd, who has risen to where he is as a professor for his outstanding work, and also works in the area of tourism, a sector that is close to my heart, called on me, I think it was Friday, Lloyd, and he asked me if I could say a few words about the book. I said, Lloyd, I don't even have a copy of the book. And to which he said, okay, just wait a minute. And then within 3 minutes, I saw a copy, an e-copy in my email. And then within half an hour, someone delivered the copy of the book to me. And I said, Lloyd, but I have so many things to do this weekend. How is it possible? He said, man, you'll find a way. And Lloyd, I'm here. I found a way. And I'm here. So let's see what I think of the book. Now, this book is co-edited by another good friend of mine, the minister. And minister, you know that I admire you for your clear strategic vision. And as I said, this book deals with a topic that is close to my heart, tourism. Okay, can you hear me now? Is that better? Now, there can be no doubt that the industry, which has felt the wrath of the pandemic more so than most, has been the tourism industry. But it does seem that through the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center, Lloyd, you and your colleagues have been on the front lines of resilience and recovery analysis and advocacy. And I would argue that nowhere is this more visible than in the form of the book that we're going to be speaking about and launching today. The book, Tourism Resilience and Recovery for Global Sustainability and Development, is an edited collection comprising 13 chapters that speak to the impact, recovery, and opportunities resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. To quote the editors, This book was conceptualized by the GTRCMC based on our experiences in managing COVID-19 pandemic through various projects and partners around the world, unquote. Minister, how often have we heard the expression, tourism is fickle? And how often have we seen this industry bounce back from the myriad crises that have afflicted the world? From earthquakes and tsunamis to terrorist attacks, and yes, pandemics, like the one we are trying to shake off now. But as you and Professor Waller point out in your introductory chapter, this ostensible pre-pandemic overconfidence of bouncing back ought to be, and I quote again, ought to be tempered by a more intuitive, intelligent, proactive, holistic, and comprehensive approach to building tourism resilience, unquote. I submit that you are indeed on target here, editors. Although I would hasten to add consultative to that highly commendable list that I've just identified. James Baldwin once said that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed unless it is faced. The quotation by Waller and Bartlett is about achieving radical change in our thinking. And although many would say that we already knew this, the fact that the discourse on tourism has shifted and is led by the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center with a sitting minister of tourism represents an admirable transformation. Because I would say, colleagues, that for many years there has been a discourse in tourism which sort of separated the academy from those who are involved in the praxis, either at the level of the companies or the hotels or the attractions or at the level of government. And what we see in this book is a convergence of ideas. And I'm happy to say that this convergence is not simply led by the academics, but those involved in the practice. And for that, Minister, we have to congratulate you, and you can congratulate him for that. Now, the theme of resilience and the recalibration runs throughout the book, at least in those sections that I've had the opportunity to read thus far. Evidential support emerges to varying degrees in the chapters by Spencer and Shivers, Johnson and Waller, Nelson, Reed et al., Burke and Burke, Mooney, Bernal, and Incinali, and Gordon et al. Now, while they acknowledge the threats spawned by the pandemic, they equally shine a light in the direction of a Silk Road. Consequently, in reviewing these essays, I could not help but slip into a reflection of the wisdom of the great Mary Seacole, who said, "Beside the nettle ever grows the cure for its sting." These solicitous musings by the renowned Jamaican humanitarian and nurse are apt in reference to a number of articles in the collection. For example, those on air travel and digital transformation, in which incidentally I've noticed Lloyd has a hand in both articles. However, one article that stands out is the COVID-19 and the Caribbean, from unprecedented economic shock to unparalleled opportunity, in which Henry Mooney lays out a case for Caribbean governments to seize the opportunity to reorient our economies in a more progressive direction. Aspects of his prescription are captured in a summary form in the table 1013 on pages 214 to 215 for those of you who have a copy of the book, where he identifies areas for targeting. However, colleagues and friends, if you want to know more about what he said, I suggest you read the book. And if you don't have a copy, I suggest you buy a copy of the book. that chapter is a very insightful one. Friends and colleagues, I could not conclude my brief intervention without commenting on Minister Bartlett's piece, that is chapter 9. I commend it to you as it speaks volumes about a person who's passionate and knowledgeable, both in the theory and praxis of the sector. Returning to my introductory comments, Minister, I've always seen you as an inspiring visionary leader for the tourism sector, not only locally, but way beyond our shores. And while we may not always agree on the details of your vision, it is clear from the chapter that not only do you have a vision, but you seek to combine that vision with a strategy. This remarkable quality of yours is clearly reflected in your discussion of your blue ocean strategy, which, and I quote from the chapter, calls for the creation of a business model that departs from the traditional models based on competition and standardization. The celebrated Chinese strategist, the author of The Art of War, Sun Tzu, once said, "Strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. Tactics without strategy is a noise before defeat." Your emphasis on strategy, Minister, should be a reminder to us all that resilience and recovery require strategic clarity. It is that same foresight, that plan of action, that led to the establishment of the GTRCMC, to which you were so central. To quote Dr. Talib Rafai in the foreword, and I quote, "During my tenure at the UNWTO, I worked ceaselessly to position the global tourism sector to transition towards a more resilient and sustainable product. It was that strategic posture that informed the establishment of the GTR-CMC at the UWI," unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, I see this publication as one of the many tactics emerging from a larger strategy, a strategic impetus led by the GTR-CMC. That it has been published so quickly before the sunset of the pandemic speaks to a level of agility for which they could only be envied. And for that, we have to congratulate the two authors, and particularly my good friend, Professor Lloyd Waller, who's the executive director. My one disappointment, Lloyd, is that we didn't have a sort of a comparative, comparative cases with other regions of the world. For example, I would have liked to see something coming out of Africa, West Africa in particular, because it is my experience that they have dealt with the pandemic very different from the rest of the world. West Africa and many parts of Africa represent a very unique space with respect to resilience. Not only resilience in how people live their lives, but also with respect to the tourism sector. And I would suggest, I should say, that going forward, that we look at the lessons coming out of a number of African countries in the way in which they have tackled the pandemic and the industry, tourism industry in relation to the pandemic. Now, this collection of essays by scholars, practitioners, and technocrats, and arguably the most consequential industry in the Caribbean, and one of the largest in the world, has my commendations. Yes, there will be time for greater and more in-depth reading, rereading, critique, and analysis of the work. But for now, at this moment, let us all congratulate and celebrate this work. Congratulations to the conceptualizers, the editors, the publishers, and of course the authors. I hope it will be added to the book list of the relevant courses at the UWI in the coming academic year. To be sure, I've already added it to my library. And thank you very much.
All right, thank you Professor Boxill. Now, Professor Beckles is not here with us in person, but we will turn to the monitor and we'll see his presentation right now. So we'll have that going up.
Distinguished colleagues and friends, it is always for me a very special honor to participate in celebrating the arrival of an academic text, a book of the highest quality. But on this occasion, it is much more than the normal celebration of the work of scholars, policymakers, and industry leaders. This is special. It is special because, in many ways, this book launch is in fact the rendezvous of victory. It is a rendezvous of victory because it represents the arrival of all stakeholders of the most important industry within our Caribbean world, and an industry that is critical to the global world, that has been in crisis and in peril, but it's now on its way to recovery within the context of new and innovative visions. What we have here at this rendezvous of victory is the coming together of academic researchers, industry leaders, and policy formulators coming together to speak of a journey to a crisis, the management of a crisis, and critically, shaping and forging the reality thereafter. We all know a great deal about the COVID-19 pandemic and what it has done to destroy lives, economies, industries, and the confidence of the global world. But here we are today, celebrating a monument, a collection of magnificent essays by two of our best and finest. The editors of this collection, Professor Waller of the University of the West Indies, is considered one of the brightest and most innovative scholars in the area of digital transformation, especially in the context of our modern tourism economy. Working jointly as editor with the Minister of Tourism of Jamaica, Minister Ed Bartlett, who we all know is an irrepressible leader of this industry. One of the finest minds that we have been able to put together to create and forge a leadership for an industry so vital to our survival. This partnership for progress between a distinguished academic and a renowned industry leader is for a great cause. That cause, the sustainability of the tourism industry, not only in the Caribbean, but globally. Yes, globally, because while much of the content might be rooted in the Caribbean experience, the collection itself is dedicated to the global circumstance. We know this to be true. We know it to be true because Minister Bartlett and Professor Wallo are indeed the professional leaders of a new and innovative institution that has emerged in recent years, the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center, headquartered at the University of the West Indies, our Mona campus in Jamaica. This book, then, this excellent edition of first-class writing, emerges from this center. It carries an appropriate title: Tourism Resilience and Recovery for Global Sustainability and Development. Its subtitle focuses the discourse even more precisely: Navigating COVID-19 and the Future. All of the relevant themes and issues are presented here in professional, cogent, precise, stimulating fashions. But it's a collection that helps us to understand precisely why the strategic plan of the University of the West Indies is so relevant. A critical part of this strategic plan promotes the concept of alignment between the university and industry. I can think of no better example of critical alignment than for a research center and policy center guided by an innovative professor should be in alignment with some of the finest industry leaders available, and in particular, our own distinguished Minister of Tourism, Minister Bartlett. It's an alignment process that speaks to resilience and recovery. It speaks to global development, and importantly, to the future, the post-COVID reality that the region and the world are now forging. This is a subject matter that requires multifaceted and multidisciplinary perspectives. These approaches are embedded in the diversity of the tourism sector. There's a tremendous sense of openness, not only diversity, but openness within the context of how an industry has emerged globally. The themes in this collection focus precisely upon this diversity. There are themes such as customer satisfaction issues, ICT strategies and resilience, digital transformation and cybersecurity, logistics and travel policy, public policy and private investment, economic shocks and financial strategies, and again, the possible futures that are awaiting this sector. This collection of brilliant essays begins with a critical introduction by our two editors. It's an introduction that frames the narrative of each chapter. It's an introduction that sets out the nature of the content of the collection, that speaks to innovative research, policy initiatives, and how governments and organizations have had deep dives into matters ranging from risk management to new market assessments. Only a partnership of this nature, a policymaker, research professor, could have represented these issues in this way, forging a narrative for readers to understand the anxieties and the fears that have been associated with this COVID-19 pandemic. It is an excellent exercise in academic clarity and professional policy practice. The Caribbean is examined in detail, but primarily as a window to the world. The discourse of Caribbean vulnerability is also set against the background of desperation caused by a pandemic as destructive as we could imagine. Minister Bartlett's own chapter, Saving Jamaica, A Life of Experiences, is a tour de force of a mind that managed a crisis hands on. It is a literary rendition that speaks to personal pain, public service, and the love of an industry that has been a lifelong project. I can think of no more relevant an author to speak to this from the personal perspective while in association with the academic and professional discourse. Each author has a legitimate right to be here included in this collection. And this relevance, this legitimacy, is based on their proven records of professional participation in the multi-dimensional sector. I am extremely proud of this collection, as I am extremely proud of the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center at the University of the West Indies that has made this splendid volume possible. I am particularly proud to know that one of our youngest professors has provided such an important academic and professional act of leadership, and doubly proud to know that our minister, Minister Bartlett, Minister of Tourism here in Jamaica, took up his pen and in a pure professorial fashion documented his intellectual insights for global sharing. This volume is truly a manifesto to the post-COVID movement, the movement of recovery and transformation. Let it be read by all. Let it be digested by all for the world that we wish to imagine with an even brighter future. Our editors, we thank you enormously for this academic and professional contribution. It is more than an academic volume. It is indeed a statement, a representation, rendezvous to victory. Thank you both very much.
Right. So that was Sir Hilary Beckles, Vice Chancellor of the UWI, University of the West Indies, and we had Professor Boxell before that, Deputy Principal of the University of the West Indies, Mona Campus. Right now, if we're following our programs closely, I have here musical interlude and lunch. I don't see any singers, and I didn't walk with my piano, so I'm assuming that the technical people sort out the musical interlude. But I'm sure you've started to get the food, and we're just gonna work into that as we have our musical interlude. So, stay with us because we have a bit of a way to go after this break. So, musical interlude and lunch.
But I was just reminding a friend of mine that it's not that occasion as yet. Anyway, thank you everybody for coming here today. And thank you VC. Oh, and thank you VC for your very, very well delivered presentation. It was extremely touching and passionate as usual. And I want to start there by talking about passion. To say that this book was produced by passion. And I'm going to say the passion that this book was produced from was Minister Bartlett's passion. And I'll explain that shortly, because the book was actually put together in less than 6 months. The agility of it, the process, the activities that we had to go through. Again, I see Christine checking if it's 6 or 8 or something like that. Again, it was driven by someone else's passion. And the passion was largely based on a concern that we in the GTRCMC had at the time. When COVID started, we were a part of several different committees and task force. And for those of you who know, I'm a methodologist. I can only work on data. And I was very cognizant of the fact that the enormity of tourism today was not the same enormity of tourism with the last major pandemic. And as a result of that, we would not have the data points to use. But we did pull some data points from recent events surrounding SARS and MERS. And we did have access to some research projects that were going on in the now. So for example, I knew that Dr. Burke and her son, and I really envy you, to be quite frank. Dr. Burke had continued to publish in your mother. Dr. Burke and her son was doing some work on COVID and tourism. I knew that myself and a couple other persons were doing some work on technology. Our minister was always every day talking about what was happening, and he really needs to document all he did, because this can happen again in another 100 years, and we really need to find some way to archive the information and the records to provide a best practice or some lessons learned for someone else. And then I remember that Kerry and I we had several conversations about mental health and COVID, and I said, this was a perfect opportunity. And then we have other persons. We had Caroline, who was also talking about doing some publications, among other things. And then we had Ambassador Bernal as well, and different authors who at the time were working on several research projects. So I had reached out to them to say, can I get access to the data point? Tell us what's happening. And then when I was speaking to Minister, each night I'm relaying information back to the Minister for his utterances or for his understanding of the tourism space. He said to me, let's do a book. And I said, a lot of persons are doing some work, and I don't think I left the best for last. I think Mr. Reed was doing some work with airlift and cruise ship, and it was based on that report that was said. Minister said we really need to find a way to transform this into a publication so other persons, because very often when you have these international reports, they fall on deaf ears or they vanish, and so we needed to find a way to incorporate all of this into a book, and the idea was born, and the passion was there in terms of Minister asking every day, when and where is the book, right? When and where is the book? And since we started the project, we had other persons who have come on board. We had Professor Spencer, who came on board with Dr. Shevers, who did a fantastic work on digital transformation. We had Damian Gordon, who was doing some work on cybercrime, and we had Dr. Carol Nelson, who was already doing some work on various other research projects. So we had that book, we had that content. How do you publish it now? So we reached out to several publishers, but Ian Randall Publishers is a brilliant publishing place. They know strategy. They know a good product when they see it. And Christine was gracious enough to facilitate the publication. in record time, and it was it was a project of passion, Christine. That's what it was, to be quite frank. And she's laughing, and she knows exactly what I'm talking about, because I would call her every day to say, Minister is asking when, can we put in this chapter, and it was supported by TEF and other persons, and the outcome, this book, is the first, perhaps the first publication on tourism and COVID since the COVID pandemic, if memory serves me correctly. And but that's not the only first. It's the first publication that has a combination of academics, policymakers, technocrats, students, and persons who are working in the tourism space. All right. And Professor Boxer will be the first to tell you that this is indeed an achievement, because even within the tourism space, studying tourism has been something that many persons have not been very comfortable with until recently, because of the association of the labor-market relationship that may be likened in some instance to a different type of system that existed prior to 1938. So no one will ever say that I came up here and said something, right? So, right, and as a result of that, it was shun. But more recently, through the works of persons such as Professor Boxill and also Professor Spencer and Michelle MacLeod, in terms of highlighting the importance and the value and the contributive value of tourism, we've seen the University of West Indies and many other institutions include tourism as a part of the overarching scholarly space. Now, I can definitely say, since COVID, if there's one thing that we've all learned, tourism is an important part of economic development. Because when tourism fell, every single industry fell right behind tourism. The only thing that survived was the digital technology space, because that was the only thing at the time that could facilitate what was happening. But every industry fell one after the other, and the world finally got up and realized that this thing called tourism is not just an activity that puts money in pockets of the rich, but it's actually what makes the world go around. And this book is a representation, and our observations in the last 2 years is a clear indication that it is an industry we have to protect, no matter what. It's an industry we have to expand. Thank you very much for coming. I'm not the type of person who says a lot. This is the longest I've ever spoken at a podium, to be quite outside of a lecture. But thank you very much, everyone else. And Minister Bartlett, thanks again for the experience. It has been a whirlwind, but it is a whirlwind that I would do every day and any day and over again. Thanks again, Minister.
Well, it's hard to speak after a lecture. The only thing you do after a lecture is to ask questions. Just to ensure that the lecturer is satisfied that you understood what he said. But I had to try to frame my questions more like a presentation, and I suspect that at the end of it you might see the question sign. But I want to join, first of all, Professor Waller in thanking everyone, first of all, who has come this afternoon to share with us in the launch of this, and we are humble enough to say seminal publication, because the comments that we've heard from far more eminent persons than myself, if I didn't say so, they would wonder whether I understood what they said. So I'd like really to thank you for coming, and your presence makes the point to us that perhaps there is some substance between these pages, and that perhaps our own thinking at the beginning was indeed useful and could add value to the process. I want to especially join him in thanking the contributors to this book, because I do think that the essays were absolutely outstanding. I've had the benefit of reviews from one or two of my friends who are of some intellectual value in the global space. And the responses have been absolutely outstanding. They have said clearly that this is one of the finest books on the subject that is currently in the market. And I want to thank you all for that. Thank you. The other point that I wanted to make in reference to this is that they are all asking for the book. They are all asking for launches to take place in their various places. And we are going to oblige because we saw what happened in Dubai when we did the first launch, and we certainly saw what happened in Toronto last week where we made a second launch. And I think Professor Waller is going to Greece next week. Am I talking about the third? Or the week after? The week after. And I know I've already spoken to some persons who are very interested in a launch. And I know we have Bulgaria in July, in Sofia. And I know that they are interested in a launch. And we have London at the end of April, where, among other things, for all my sins, I am to be inducted in the British Tourism Hall of Fame on the 28th, and they are having discussions with Oxford and LSE for possible satellite centers to be established there. They're also talking to the university in Switzerland. You know, the Swiss are the tourism center of Europe. And they're saying you can't have a center anywhere in the world if you don't have one in Lucerne or someplace in Switzerland. So chances are we're looking there. And to your point, Professor Boxell, your excellent presentation, and I haven't come to you yet, nor have I reached to Professor Beckles, but that the intention is to have a second publication in short order, and we'll be focusing on best practices globally. The good news for us is that we do have a center in East Africa, in Nairobi, and that's the first center that we established at the Kenyatta University, and that one is doing extremely well. As a matter of fact, Prof, they're doing better than us here in Jamaica. I mean, their publications have been, daily almost, and it's a kind of rigor that is really very satisfying to us. They are doing a great job in the entire East Africa and areas of the Indian Ocean. In fact, they've filtered into Central and West Africa as well. So that Botswana is talking about having a center. The minister spoke to us about it. And Namibia is also wanting a center. They've talked to us about it. And the Minister of Tourism, who is the Deputy Prime Minister of Mauritius, spoke to me 2 days ago wanting to establish a center in Mauritius for the Indian Ocean Rim. The Rim countries, which would be Singapore, Australia, Thailand, and those areas. And you know that all the headquarters for the multilaterals in the Rim are in Mauritius. So having a center there will be useful indeed. So what we're saying is that the world is talking about having a center. And the reason is very simple. There is what Professor Beckles called the post-COVID movement that is happening. And that movement is conscious of one thing, that disruptions are not ending. that this Anthropocene era is loaded with disruptions. And you're going to have more and more disruptions. And therefore, the consciousness of preparation has just hit that shock of recognition, Professor Harriet, that yes, this one hit us, the first ever, arguably, in human existence, where the entire world was affected simultaneously. So there was nobody to say, okay, we did it this way, so when it comes to you, you can do it that way. There's nobody to say, okay, here are some thoughts that I have, on my own experience you can share. No, we all were struggling together to understand what had hit us, and more so to find a way. So the whole process became highly iterative. It became a whole series of trial and error, and who was doing it good and who. And then we were sharing ideas. But I think the important value of all of what was happening is that man had developed a level of intelligence and technology and ability to communicate that is unprecedented in our history. And so this interconnectivity and this hyperconnectivity that it became enabled us to keep in touch and find out what was happening and share ideas. And I believe that resulted in the swiftness with which we found a vaccine and the seemingly pace of recovery that the world is enjoying today. So what we are conscious of is the need to build capacity, to build the ability to understand, first of all, disruptions. And that's what this book is about. This book is about a consciousness of the need to prepare for disruptions because they're going to come. It is about being able to track disruptions when they are in the air. It's about being able to mitigate against disruptions when they are heading your way. It's about being able to manage disruptions when they actually reach to you. And then it's about recovery from disruptions when they are there, and recover fast, and finally to thrive. So understanding why this compendium of essays and the selection of who and what the subject matter was is very critical indeed. And so we are leaders today in that post-COVID movement as we seek to prepare the world for the next wave of disruption. But you will forgive me if I go back a little bit to its origin, because I think it's useful. My permanent secretary is here, and I really want to indulge her in this process, because I do think that, when the idea emerged, she was there. And she is actually the secretary for the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center. She's secretary to the board. And the board is an international board composed of luminaries and practitioners from every continent except Oceania. We didn't quite get the Australian on the board. But we have a board member from Japan, from South Korea, from Thailand, from the UK, from the US. We have two from Jamaica, Professor Beckles himself, as well as Mr. Earl Jarrett. And we have from Jordan, Professor Talib Rafai, and we also have from Malta. We have co-chairs, one President Kenyatta from Kenya and one Prime Minister, Most Honorable Michael Andrew Holness from Jamaica, and the former President of Malta, Madame Prekau. We have associate members of the board who are also from various countries, like Greece, and the Commissioner for Tourism at the EU is an associate member, and the former executive of the State Commerce Secretary of Commerce, yes, in the U.S., Isabella Hill, is also an associate member. So we are a truly international organization headquartered here in Jamaica at the University of the West Indies. And when I had the idea first, and it was born out of a presentation I made at a crisis management seminar in the margins of the world travel market. And the Philippines had just had a mega disruption. And it just coincided with that seminar, which was being held there in London, just about, I think it was the 5th of November, 2017. And at the time also, Jamaica was heavy in preparing for the first ever global conference on sustainable tourism here at in Montego Bay. And when I spoke, I called then for regional centers for crisis management, because we were seeing that the discussion showed that there was such a weakness in terms of ability of countries that are vulnerable to disruptions to manage crisis. And I think Professor Lee Miles from Beaumont University was there, and he was one of the, as a matter of fact, he's on the board of the center now as well. He was there with me, and he said, but Minister, you know, that's very visionary. I said, well, the truth is that we in the Caribbean have issues relating to this. We are susceptible to hurricanes and seismic disruptions, and all hurricanes happen every year, and they get more dangerous, more vicious, more destructive as the year goes by. At the time, Irma and Maria had not yet hit. And then that happened. So we came to our conference in Montego Bay, sort of charged up and said, we have to find a way to deal with this. And in the discussions, we decided that the outcome of that conference, formulated in what was then called the Montego Bay Declaration, should have 3 critical asks. The first was to establish a global tourism resilience and crisis management center to respond to the vulnerability, and Professor Boxer says the fickleness, and we in tourism say the vulnerability of tourism, because the resilience of tourism is countered somewhat by the vulnerability of tourism. And I think what makes tourism truly powerful and such a driver for recovery is that resilience capability coming from its vulnerability to disruptions. And we've had 4 mega ones in the last 50 years, and on each occasion, tourism has bounced back faster and better and grew exponentially over the period. So we do have the track record of resilience that we can boast about. So the second was that we should establish multi-destination tourism as a driver of regional tourism, given our size and scale and our inability to access the big markets because of that. And we have been on that path for a little bit, and I must tell you, we are now almost there. Mexico has finally sent me their list of members of the team, and that's a good sign. So Jamaica, Mexico, DOMREP, Cuba, and Panama will form the first group for multi-destination tourism in the Caribbean. And the third was for us to recognize the importance of the small and medium tourism enterprises. In fact, we coined the SMTE. Everybody in the world says SMEs, on some SMMEs and so on. We said SMTE. And Professor Waller and I traveled to the G20 meeting in Argentina to put that message forward. And we actually wrote a document on it for the small and medium tourism enterprises, because 80% of tourism is driven by the small and medium enterprises, but they only receive 20% of the returns from tourism. So there is some imbalance there, an asymmetry that we have to balance. And so we were determined to get to that rebalancing. And so we were calling on everybody to spend more resources on giving capacity to these small enterprises so that they can extract more from tourism, so that they can understand better business practices, so that they can understand marketing, so that they can get funding at cost that is affordable. And more importantly, so we could develop ideas, mine ideas, invest in ideas, because it is a conversion of those ideas into material goods and services that brings the innovation and causes the experiences of your area to be special, unique. And therein lies the Blue Ocean strategy, which we spoke about. So we brought President Uribe here in 2019 for a conference, the first and perhaps only of its kind, on small and medium enterprises. And that one is moving nicely. The World Bank has taken on to it, and we see Ready 1, Ready 2, and now Ready 3. And we are seeing a lot more emphasis on small and medium tourism enterprises. So those are the three asks of that conference, Mr. Dyer, that you spend so much money on. And the result has been, I think, positioning Jamaica as a true thought leader in tourism globally. And I'm very proud of that. Now, I fail in every attempt that I make to be short in making some of these presentations. So forgive me today, because the passion is coming out, right? And since everybody talk about the passion I have, just give me a chance to express the passion points. But the center has grown and has surprised everybody. When we discussed it with the chairman and founder of the World Travel Awards, the man who is responsible for giving all the awards in the world for tourism, he said to me, "You're crazy." But it's kind of a good craziness. How could you imagine that Jamaica could be the world headquarters for anything like a resilience movement? So it's a great idea you have to establish the Resilience Center, but it's the wrong place. You have to have it in London or Zurich or Washington or New York or some big international center, and then the world will listen to you. They ain't going to listen to you from Kingston, Jamaica. Well, a few weeks ago, we were in Dubai at the Dubai 2020 Expo. And at that expo, the Global Tourism and Resilience Center, in 3 weeks, put together one of the most impressive forums that the world has seen in tourism. The result of which is this document, the Dubai Declaration for Tourism Resilience Day. And we had the response and support of all the gatekeepers of tourism in the world. The WTTC, the UNWTO, the OAS. We had statements from the Secretary General of the OAS at the forum. We had the UN Secretary General sending a message through the Deputy Secretary General and requesting that the outcome of that forum be sent to them to be utilized in their own strategy for the way forward. And we were able to have over 200 organizations and institutions backing and giving support to the establishment of February 17th every year from 2023 as Global Tourism Resilience Day. And that was a very powerful thing, we think. And the gentleman, the chairman of the World Travel Awards, was there. And he came over to me and he says, "I apologize. I really thought it couldn't happen. But yes, Kingston can be the headquarters of global tourism in the world." And that, I think, said it all to us. So now we have centers in Africa, in Canada, North America, in Jordan, in the Middle East. Thanks, Anake. In the Middle East, and we are heading for Greece, in the Mediterranean, and for Sofia, Bulgaria, in the East Europe, London, and we are sure about Africa, West Africa. We are sure about West Africa. And before the year is ended, Jamaica will be headquarters for more than 10 countries that would have resilience centers established. I went through that because I want us to know the power of ideas. And that's what man has to save our souls during this period. That's all we have, ideas. And we are spending some money on ideas. And for my sins, we're putting 31 million in this budget for innovation and the establishment of an innovation incubator for tourism. We did that last year, in fact. So it's a little more money we're putting this year. And the idea is to mine ideas, to invest in ideas, to enable the conversion of ideas into practical and material goods and services for the industry. So anywhere the young people are, and whatever their station, whatever their economic abilities or otherwise, you have ideas, come to us, let's talk about it. Because the Blue Ocean strategy that will characterize the strategic engagements for tourism for the future is born, bred, nurtured, and supported by ideas. We want new ideas because that's how we're going to create new products and new experiences, and tourism will continue to be the driver of economic transformation in Jamaica. In closing, I'd like to say to Professor Beckles, we do appreciate the partnership that we've been able to forge over the years. And I must say that I haven't had a chance to interface as closely with other vice chancellors. I mean, you know, I had my days I started with Professor Marshall. That would date me a little bit, wouldn't it? All right. And we went through the list. But Professor Beckleson has really been a great support to us in our efforts to streamline, mainstream, and to position tourism. And I want that point to be made and understood. That when we went to him with the idea of the Resilience Center, he was very enthusiastic. Professor Bernal was there, and he helped us with it all together. And in all fairness, he didn't just say, yes, we support it, and we would like you to have a center. He called Professor Boxall, as it were, and said to him, vacate your place and make it available so we could put a center. Mind you, had to give him a better place. But we ended up with his former office that is now converted into the center. And for those who want to go and look at the center, you can go. We are on West Road, right? And we are just on the other side of the PJ Patterson Center. But it's a nicer looking center, actually. Don't tell him I said so. No, but I really want to say to Professor Beckles, we are indebted to you. We thank you very much for the support, because you ended up being a member of the board as well. So in other words, he didn't just say, it's a nice idea, let's have it. He was willing to put his own effort and his name against the center and its future. And we're very, 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 very happy for that. And thank you so much for the kind words that you said today about the center, and particularly the very humbling thoughts that I managed to find a way to internalize. I mean, it was a little difficult there, but we tried to internalize it. Thanks, Prof. Thanks, Professor Boxill, for coming here today, for sharing with us. Thank you all for being great partners, and I look forward to a bestseller. But most importantly, I'd like this to be in every school, in every university, and certainly in every tourism bureau in the world. Thank you. God bless you all.
All right, we'd like to thank Minister Bartlett. I'm still waiting for the question mark at the end of his presentation, but we are basically at the end, and we have heard a lot of the passion. You agree with me? I heard a lot of the passion, man. I'm sure I heard East Africa mentioned about 3 times. So if Professor Boxill isn't sure about Africa, you know, he's sure no. So we'd like to, I'd definitely like to issue thanks to a number of individuals, but before that, I was asked to invite everybody to stand so that we take a toast to this great achievement, and I know Professor Waller would be leading out in that regard. Cheers, indeed, cheers. Thank you so much. You may be seated. Now, I'd like to start issuing the thanks as I get them. Firstly, I would have read the names of the contributors at the start, and I would like to thank all the contributors on behalf of Professor Waller and Minister Bartlett. I would like to thank all the contributors. Special thanks to Miss Christine Randall, and I know you might have gone through a lot, you know, just Professor Waller going back and forth, you know. I'd like to issue that thanks, of course. You know, Professor Boxill, as you say, you got one of those last minute calls, and you put Professor Waller on the spot there, you know. He's not always last minute, but, you know, you are here, you turned up, and you indeed gave us a good review. We'd like to thank Professor Beckles, who, though not here physically, he came virtually, and he indeed gave us not only a charge, but his insights on the book. We'd like to thank everybody here in the audience. Give yourself a round of applause. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing in this moment. Yes, I see a number of individuals. If I could call all the names, we'd be here all evening, but we don't have all evening. Huh? So I'd like to thank those who are online. We're being streamed on YouTube right now as we speak. We'd like to thank Fiona, Anna, and Triselle. Give them a round of applause. Those are some very special people who would have aided in not just the book and the behind the scenes, but even us being here today. And we'll definitely like to thank Dr. Walters, who has been very instrumental in all of us being here this afternoon. Right? So those are the thanks, and as I said, I'd like to thank you all. I am very happy and elated to be a part of this. And right now, as we bring the curtains down, we are going to have an opportunity for individuals to come to the good minister with all of his passion, to put some of the passion in his pen and sign those books to those who have their books here with them, and also for the contributors to come to the front, and we'll have some photo opportunities. And that is what we'll do now. It is indeed the end of the event, and give a round of applause for a good event, for being here, for being yourselves, and just for a good evening. Thank you so much. I am Sondre Roden, and I hope to see you next time when you invite me to host your event.